limit, not to compromise. And you can tell me if I mean it, looking in my eyes. Cause I've been waiting for my moment to strike. So come close, let me show you what it's like. Yeah, you can try to stand in my path, but you're gonna regret it. I'll be the one who laughs last while I'm making my exit. Cause this is only for the strong of heart, not if you get it. And no matter what the outcome, you better accept it. I can cut like the shell, I can bury the pain. So don't doubt for a second, just get out of my way. Cause you're staying still, I'm not letting you go. So take this as the lesson, cause it's all that we know. Will the whole world know your name? When we dance with destiny. I've been there and I've seen it. I'm never gonna stop believing. You'll find your flame. Oh, we can save the day. It's like I'm seeing double vision. Take a seat, I'm on a mission. We got everything to gain. Yeah, to become everything you're not. You just give it all you got and take the pleasure with the pain. Yeah, I can feel my fire awaken. No time for being complacent. There's a dream on the horizon. You know we gotta chase it. And when we get to where we're going, then we start the invasion. That's me? Now you must be mistaken. You know I'll turn you into rust. Grind you right down to dust. You thought you were the best. Well, you
Hello and welcome. And as you can probably see, I know we have a lovely Percy Jackson book right next to us, but before we begin, I'm gonna cut the music. Unfortunately, this is the last day of the for the popular mobile game, Dragalia Lost, so I just want to start off by saying farewell to the mobile app that honestly I really enjoyed quite a lot. It kind of hurts. It kind of. Oh, sorry, wrong one. I was trying to be more emotional. Nope. Nope. That's not it. Nope. No, that's not it. Nope. 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 That's not. Well, you get the idea. I'm just trying to find the reaction that goes with this sad face. Dragalia Lost is actually a fantastic mobile game, and I really hope the developers, Side Games, do something with it in the future. If you want more on the Dragalia Lost universe, if you've never heard of it, there are plenty of content creators who also talk about it, myself included. So I just want to say this. Thank you, Dragalia Lost, for being one of the most impactful mobile games I have ever played. Not the kind of, not what I was really going to begin with. I know I want to do a Dragalia Lost stream, but due to technical difficulties and lack of people participants, we couldn't do it. But I guess we should start by, I guess our backup plan was this, of course. So let's continue off where we last took place. Exactly. You get it, Speedstar. It's, I guess, Via Rise Alberia indeed. Well, without further ado, I guess it's time to get reading. For those who don't know, I actually once a week try to do a book reading club where we actually read some of my favorite books, and we're still on the first one. So, for those who are if you guys want to catch up on what's been going on, or if you've missed any of the chapters, I do have them in the highlights in my videos, as well as in the secondary channel, The Unlucky Streams, which you can find in the About section. But where we last took off, we actually are in Camp Half-Blood, and Percy is learning about the truth about the Greek gods and such. That they're real, Dionysius is there. I gave him a Danny DeVito expression. And here comes more Drigeli Lost music to go with it. I would like to play some music in the background if you guys want some listening to. But we are now on Chapter 6. I become Supreme Lord of the Bathroom. I should also let you know at the end of every chapter we'll have a few-minute break just to, pick up refreshments, or I need to put some water down my whistle. Once I got over the fact that my Latin teacher was a horse, we had a nice tour, though I was careful not to walk behind him. I'd done Pooper Scooper Patrol in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade a few times, and I'm sorry, I did not trust I forgot how to pronounce it. I believe I pronounced it Chiron, like Chi. Do not trust Chiron's back end the way I trusted his front. We paused the volleyball pit. Several of the campers nudged each other. One pointed to the Minotaur horn I was carrying and said, "That's him!" Most of the campers were older than me. Their satyr friends were bigger than Grover, all of them trotting around in orange Camp Half-Blood t-shirts, with nothing else to cover their bare, shaggy hindquarters. I wasn't normally shy, but the way they stared at me made me uncomfortable. I felt like they were expecting me to do a flip or something. I looked back at the farmhouse. It was a lot bigger. Then I realized 4 stories tall, sky blue with white trim, like an upscale seaside resort. I was checking out the brass eagle weather vane on top when something caught my eye. A shadow in the uppermost window of the attic gable. Something had moved the curtain just for a second, and I got the distinct impression I was being watched. "What's up there?" I asked Chiron. He looked where I was pointing, and his smile faded. "Just the attic." "Somebody lives there?" "No," he said, finality. "Not a single living thing." I got the feeling he was being truthful, but I was also sure something had moved the curtain. "Come along, Percy," Chiron said, his light-hearted tone now a little forced. "Lots to see." We walked through the strawberry fields, where campers were picking bushels of berries while a satyr played a tune on a reed pipe. Chiron told me the camp grew a nice crop for export to New York restaurants and Olympus. "It pays our expenses, and the strawberries take almost no effort." He said Mr. D had this effect on fruit-bearing plants. They were just crazy when he was around. It worked best with wine grapes, but Mr. D was restricted from growing those, so they grew strawberries instead. His music was causing lines of bugs to leave the strawberry patch in every direction, like refugees fleeing a fire. I wondered if Grover could work that kind of magic with music, or if he was still inside the farmhouse getting chewed out by Mr. D. "Grover won't get in too much trouble, will he?" I asked Chiron. I mean, He was a good protector, really. Chiron sighed. His shed, he shed his tweed jacket and draped over his horse's back like a saddle. Grover had big dreams, Percy. Perhaps bigger than are reasonable. To reach his goal, he must first demonstrate great courage by succeeding as a keeper, finding a new camper and bringing him safely to Half-Blood Hill. But he did that. I might agree with you, but it is not my place to judge. Dodosius and the Council of Cloven Elders must decide. After all, Grover lost you in New York. Then there's the unfortunate fate of your mother. And the fact that Grover was unconscious when you dragged him over the property line. The council might question whether this shows any courage on Grover's part. I wanted to protest. None of this happened was Grover's fault. I also felt... Where's the... Sorry, I kind of lost my spot like an idiot. I also felt really, really guilty. If I hadn't given Grover the slip at the bus station, he might not have gotten in trouble. He'll get a second chance. He'll get a second chance, won't he? Chiron winced. I'm afraid that was Grover's second chance, Percy. The council was not anxious to give him another either, after what happened the first time, 5 years ago. Olympus knows I advised him to wait longer before trying again. He's still small for his age. How old is he? Oh, 28. What? And he's in the 6th grade? Satyrs mature half as fast as humans, Percy. Grover has been the equivalent of a middle school student for the past 60 years. Man, that doesn't sound fun at all. Imagine being stuck in puberty limbo for 6 years. That's horrible. I agree. I couldn't agree more. Quite. Chiron agreed. At any rate, Grover is a late bloomer, even by satyr standards, and not yet very accomplished at woodland magic. Unless he was anxious to pursue his dream. Perhaps now he will find some other career. It's not fair, I said. What happened the first time? Was it really so bad? Chiron looked away quickly. Let's move along now, shall we? But I wasn't quite ready to let the subject drop. Something had occurred to me when Chiron talked about my mother's fate, as if he were intentionally avoiding the word death. The beginnings of an idea, a tiny, hopeful fire, started forming in my mind. Chiron, I said. If the gods in Olympus and all that are real. Yes, child. Does that mean the underworld is real too? Chiron's expression darkened. Yes, child. He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. There is a place where spirits go after death. But for now, until we know more, I would urge you to put that out of your mind. What do you mean? Until we know more? Come on, Percy. See the woods. As we got closer, I realized how huge the forest was. It took up at least a quarter of the valley, with trees so tall and thick, you could imagine nobody had been there since the Native Americans. Chiron said, the woods are stocked, if you care to try your luck, but go armed. Stocked with what? I asked. Armed with what? You'll see. Capture the flag is Friday night. Do you have your own sword and shield? My own? No, Chiron said. I don't suppose you do. I think a size 5 will do. I'll visit the armory later. I wanted to ask what kind of summer camp had an armory. but there was too much else to think about. So the tour continued. We saw the archery range, the canoe lake, the stables, which Chiron didn't seem to like very much, the javelin range, the sing-along amphitheater, and the arena where Chiron said they held swords and spear fights. Sword and spear fights, I asked? Cabin challenges and all that, he explained. Not lethal, usually. Oh yes, and there's the mess hall. Chiron pointed at an outdoor pavilion framed in white Grecian columns on a hill overlooking the sea. There were a dozen stone picnic tables. No roof, no walls. What do you do when it rains? I asked. Chiron looked at me as if I'd gone a little weird. We still have to eat, don't we? I decided I'd drop the subject. Finally, he showed me the cabins. There were 12 of them, nestled in the woods by the lake. They were arranged in a U, with 2 at the base and 5 in a row on either side. And they were without a doubt the most bizarre collection of buildings I had ever seen. Except for the fact that each had a large brass number above the door. Odds on the left, evens on the right. They looked absolutely nothing alike. Number 9 had smokestacks, like a tiny factory. Number 4 had tomato vines on the walls and roof made out of real glass. 7 seemed to be made of solid gold, which gleamed so much in the sunlight it was almost impossible to look at. They all faced a common area about the size of a soccer field, dotted with Greek statues, fountains, flower beds, and a couple of basketball hoops, which were more my speed. In the center of the field was a huge stone-lined fire pit. Even though it was a warm afternoon, the hearth smoldered. A girl about 9 years old was tending the flames, poking the coals with a stick. The pair of cabins at the head of the field, numbers 1 and 2, looked like his and hers mausoleums, big white marble boxes with heavy columns in front. Cabin 1 was the biggest and bulkiest of the 12. Its polished bronze doors simmered like a hologram, so that from different angles, lightning bolts seemed to streak across them. Cabin 2 was more graceful somehow, with slimmer columns garlanded with pomegranates and flowers. The walls were carved with images of peacocks. Zeus and Hera? I guess. Correct. Their cabins look empty. Several of the cabins are, that's true. No one ever stays in 1 or 2. Okay, so each cabin had a different god, like a mascot. 12 cabins were the 12 Olympians. But why would some be empty? I stopped in front of the cabin on the left. Cabin 3. It wasn't high and mighty like cabin 1, but long and low and solid. The outer walls were of rough gray stone, studded with pieces of seashell and coral, as if the slabs had been hewn straight from the bottom of the ocean floor. I peeked inside the open doorway, and Chiron said, "Oh, I wouldn't do that." Before he pulled me back, I caught the salty scent of the interior, like the wind on the shore at Montauk. The interior walls glowed like abalone. There were 6 empty bunk beds with silk sheets turned down. There was no sign anybody had ever slept there. The place felt so sad and lonely. I was glad when Chiron put his hand on my shoulders, said, "Come along, Percy." Most of the other cabins were crowded with campers. Number 5 was bright red, a real nasty paint job, as if the color had been splashed on with buckets and fists. The roof was lined with barbed wire. A stuffed wild boar's head hung over the doorway, and its eyes seemed to follow me. Inside, I could see a bunch of mean-looking kids, both girls and boys, arm wrestling and arguing with each other while rock music blared. The loudest was a girl, maybe 13 or 14. She wore a size XXXL, Camp Half-Blood t-shirt under a camouflage jacket. She zeroed in on me and gave me an evil sneer. She reminded me of Nancy Boba Fett, though the camper girl was much bigger, tougher looking, and her hair was long and stringy and brown instead of red. I kept walking, trying to steer clear of Chiron's hooves. We haven't seen any other centaurs, I observed. No, said Chiron sadly. My kinsmen are a wild and barbaric folk, I'm afraid. You might encounter them in the wilderness, at major sporting events, but you won't see them any here. You said your name was Chiron. Are you really? He smiled down at me. The Chiron from the stories, trainer of Hercules and all that. Yes, Percy, I am. But shouldn't you be dead? Chiron paused as if the question intrigued him. I honestly don't know about should be. The truth is, I can't be dead. You see, eons ago, the gods granted my wish. I could continue the work I loved. I could be a teacher of heroes as long as humanity needed me. I gained much from that wish, and I gave up much. But I'm still here, so I can assume I'm still needed. I thought about being a teacher for 3,000 years. It wouldn't have made my top 10 things to wish for list. Does it ever get boring? No, he said. Horribly depressing at times, but never boring. Why depressing? Chiron seemed to turn hard of hearing again. Oh, look, he said. Annabeth is waiting for us. The blonde girl I'd met at the big house was reading a book in front of the last cabin on the left. Number 11. When we reached her, she looked me over critically, like she was still thinking about how much I drooled. I tried to see what she was reading, but I couldn't make out the title. I thought my dyslexia was acting up, but then I realized the title wasn't even English. The letters looked Greek to me. I mean, literally Greek. There were pictures of temples and statues and other kinds of columns, like those in an architecture book. Annabeth, Chiron said, I have master's archery class at noon. Would you take Percy from here? Yes, sir. Cabin 11, Chiron told me, gesturing towards the doorway. Make yourself at home. Out of all the cabins, 11 looked the most like a regular old summer camp cabin, with the emphasis on old. The threshold was worn down, the brown paint peeling. Over the doorway was one of those doctor symbols, a winged pole with 2 snakes wrapped around it. What do they call it? A caduceus. It said it was packed with people, both boys and girls, way more than the number of bunk beds. Sleeping bags were spread out all over the floor. It looked like a gym with a red cross that's set up an evacuation center. Chiron didn't go in. The door was too low for him. But when the campers saw him, they all stood and bowed respectfully. Well then, Chiron said. Good luck, Percy. I'll see you at dinner. He galloped away toward the archery range. I stood in the doorway, looking at the kids. They weren't bowing anymore. They were staring at me, sizing me up. I knew this routine. I go through it at enough schools. Well, Annabeth prompted. Go on. So naturally, I tripped coming in the door and made a total fool of myself. There were some snickers from the campers, but none of them said anything. Annabeth announced, Percy Jackson, meet Cabin 11. Regular or undetermined, somebody asked. I knew what they said, but Annabeth said, undetermined. Everybody groaned, ugh. A guy who was a little older than the rest came forward. Now, campers, that's what we're here for. Welcome, Percy. You can have the spot on the floor right over there. The guy was about 19 and he looked pretty cool. He was tall and muscular with short, cropped, sandy hair and a friendly smile. He wore an orange tank top, cut-off sandals, and a leather necklace with 5 different colored clay beads. The only thing unsettling about his appearance was a thick white scar that ran just beneath his right eye to his jaw, like an old knife slash. "This is Luke," he said. Annabeth said, and her voice sounded somewhat different. I glanced over and could have sworn she was blushing. She saw me looking, and her expression hardened again. "He's your counselor for now." "For now?" "You're undetermined," Luke explained patiently. "They don't know what cabin to put you in, so you're here. Cabin 11 takes all newcomers, all visitors. Naturally, we would. Hermes, our patron, is the god of travelers." I looked at a tiny section of floor they'd given me. I had nothing to put there to mark for my own. No luggage, no clothes, no sleeping bag, just the Minotaur's horn. I thought about setting that down, but then I remembered that Hermes was also the god of thieves. I looked around at the campers' faces, some sullen and suspicious, some grinning stupidly, some eyeing me as if they were waiting for a chance to pick on my pockets. "How long will I be here?" "Good question," Luke said. "Until you're determined." "How long will that take?" The campers all laughed. "Come on," Annabeth told me. "I'll show you the volleyball court." "I've already seen it." "Come on." She grabbed my wrist and dragged me outside. I could hear the kids of Cabin 11 laughing behind me. When we were a feet away, Annabeth said, "Jackson, you have to do better than that." "What?" She rolled her eyes and mumbled under the breath, "I can't believe I thought you were the one." "What's your problem?" I was getting angry now. "All I know is I'm kill some bull guy." "Don't talk like that," Annabeth told me. "You know how many kids at this camp wish they had your chance? To get killed? To fight the Minotaur? What do you think we trained for?" I shook my head. "Look, if the thing I fought really was the Minotaur, the same one in the stories, yes. Then there's only one, yes. And he died like a gajillion years ago, right? Theseus killed him in the labyrinth, so monsters don't die, Percy. They can be killed, but they don't die." "Oh, thanks. That clears it up. They don't have souls like you and me. You can dispel them for a while, maybe even for the whole lifetime if you're lucky. But they are primary forces. Chiron calls them archetypes. Eventually, they reform." "What about Mrs. Dodds?" "You mean if I killed one accidentally with a sword? I mean your math teacher. That's right. She's still out there. You just made her very, very mad." "How did you know about Mrs. Dodds?" "You talk in your sleep. You almost called her something. A fury? They're Hades torturers, right?" Annabeth glanced nervously at the ground as she expected it to open up and swallow her. "You shouldn't call them by name, even here. We call them the Kinley ones. If we have to speak of them at all. Look, if there's anything we can say without it thundering..." "Look, is there anything we can say without it thundering?" I sounded whiny, even to myself. But right when I didn't care, why do I have to stay in Cabin 11 anyway? Why is everybody so crowded together? There are plenty of empty bunks right over there. I pointed at the first few cabins, and Anne turned pale. "You don't just choose a cabin, Percy. It depends on who your parents are, or your parent." She stared at me, waiting for me to get it. "My mom is Sally Jackson. She works at the candy store in Grand Central Station. At least, she used to." "I'm sorry about your mom, Percy. That's not what I mean. Talk about your other parent. Your dad. He's dead. I never knew him." Annabeth sighed. Clearly, she had this conversation before with other kids. "Your father's not dead, Percy." "How can you say that? You know him." "No, of course not." "Then how can you say, because I know you? You wouldn't be there if you weren't one of us." "You don't know anything about me." "No?" She raised an eyebrow. I bet you moved around from school to school, and I bet you were kicked out of a lot of them. How? Diagnosed with dyslexia, probably ADHD too. I tried to swallow my embarrassment. What does that have to do with anything? Taken together, it's almost a sure sign. The letters float off the page when you read, right? That's because your mind is hardwired for ancient Greek. And the ADHD, you're impulsive, can't sit until in the classroom. Can't sit still in the classroom, I meant. That's your battlefield reflexes. In a real fight, they keep you alive. As for your attention problems, that's because you see too much, Percy. Not too little. Your senses are better than regular mortals. Of course, the teachers want you medicated, but most of them are monsters. They don't want you seeing them for what they are. You sound like you went through the same thing? Most of the kids here did. If you were like us, you couldn't have survived the Minotaur, much less the ambrosia and nectar. Ambrosia and nectar? The food and drink we're giving you to make you better. Stuff would have killed a normal kid. It would have turned your blood to fire and your bones to sand, and you'd be dead. Face it, you're a half-blood. A half-blood. I was reeling with so many questions I didn't know how to start. And a husky voice yells, "Well, a newbie!" I looked over. The big girl from the ugly red cabin was sauntering towards us. She had 3 other girls behind her, all big and ugly and mean, looking like her, all wearing camo jackets. "Clarice," Annabeth sighed. "Why don't you go polish your spear or something?" "Sure, Miss Princess," the big girl said. "So I can run you through it Friday night." "Ere es Caracas," Annabeth said, which I somehow understood was Greek for "go to the crows," though I had a feeling it was a worse curse than it sounded. "You don't stand a chance. We'll pulverize ya," Clarice said, but her eye twitched. Perhaps she wasn't sure she could follow through on the threat. She turned toward me. "Who's this little runt?" "Percy Jackson," Annabeth said. "Percy Jackson? Meet Clarice, daughter of Ares." I blinked. "Like the war god?" Clarice sneered. "Got a problem with that?" "No," I said, recovering my wits. "It explains the bad smell." Clarice growled. "We got an initiation ceremony for newbies, Percy. Whatever. Come on, I'll show you." "Clarice," Annabeth tried to say, "stay out of it, wise girl." Annabeth looked pained, but she did not stay out of it, and I didn't really want to help her. I didn't want her help. I was the new kid. I had to earn my own rep. I handed Annabeth my Minotaur horn and got ready to fight, but before I knew it, Clarice had me by the neck and was dragging me toward the cinder block building that I knew immediately was the bathroom. I was kicking and punching. I'd been in plenty of fights before, but this girl, Clarice, had hands like iron. She dragged me into the girls' bathroom. There was a line of toilets on this one side, a line of shower stalls down the other. It smelled like any public bathroom, and I was thinking as much as I could think with Clarice ripping my hair out, that if this place belonged to the gods, they should have been able to afford classier Johns. Sorry. Clarice's friends were all laughing, and I was trying to find the strength I used to fight the Minotaur, but it just wasn't there. "Like he's big 3 material," Clarice said as she pushed me toward one of the toilets. "Yeah, right. Minotaur probably fell over laughing. He was so stupid looking." Her friend snickered. Annabeth stood in the corner, watching through her fingers. Clarice bent me over on my knees and started pushing my head toward the toilet bowl. It reeked like rusted pipes and, well, like what goes into toilets. I strained to keep my head up. I was looking at the scummy water thinking, I will not go into that. I won't. And something happened. I felt a tug at the pit of my stomach. I heard plumbing rumbling, the pipe shudder. Clarice's grip on my hair loosened. Water shot out of the toilet, making an arch straight over her head. And the next thing I knew, I was sprawled on the bathroom tiles with Clarice screaming behind me. I turned just as water blasted out of the toilet again, hitting Clarice straight in the face so hard it pushed her down onto her butt. The water sprayed on her like the spray from a fire hose, pushing her backwards into the shower stall. She struggled, gasping, and her friends started coming toward her. But then the other toilets exploded too, and 6 more streams of toilet water blasted from them back. The showers acted up too, and together, all the fixtures sprayed the camouflage girls right out of the bathroom, spinning them around like pieces of garbage being washed away. As soon as they were out the door, I felt a tug and my gut lessen, a water shove as it had started. The entire bathroom was flooded. Annabeth hadn't been spared. She was dripping wet, but she hadn't been pushed out the door. She was standing in exactly the same place, staring at me in shock. I looked down and realized I was sitting in the only dry spot in the whole room. There was a circle of dry floor around me. I didn't have one drop of water on my clothes. Nothing. I stood up, my legs shaky. Annabeth said, "How did you..." I don't know. We walked to the door outside. Clarice had her friends were sprawled in the mud. A bunch of other campers were gathered around the gawk. Clarice's hair was flattened across her face. Her camouflage jacket was soaping and she smelled like sewage. She gave me a look of absolute hatred. "You are dead, new boy. You are totally dead." I probably should have let go, but I said, "You want me to gargle with toilet water again, Clarice? You want to gargle with toilet water again, Clarice? Close your mouth." I probably should have let it go, but I said, oh no, wait, that's the part I read. Her friends had to hold her back. They dragged her toward cabin 5, while the other campers made way to avoid her flailing feet. Annabeth stared at me. I couldn't tell whether she was just grossed out or angry at me for dousing her. "What?" I demanded. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," she said, "that I want you on my team for Capture the Flag. So let's take a little break right here. Get some refreshments if it's around that time. And I'll be right back with some more. Well, Percy Jackson, obviously."
しまう夜が教えてくれたこと街は変わり果てた表情
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, and viewers alike. And we're going to be continuing on with more Percy Jackson. And I think we're going to get the reveal soon. I think we're also like a quarter of the way through the book, honestly. I'll tell you one thing, though. It's still better than the movie. Anywho, we're on Chapter 7. My dinner goes up in smoke. Word of the bathroom incident spread immediately. Whenever I went, campers pointed at me and murmured something about toilet water. Or maybe they were just staring at Annabeth, who was still pretty much dripping wet. She showed me a few places. The metal shop, where kids were forging their own swords. The arts and crafts room, where satyrs were sandblasting a giant marble statue of a goat man. And the climbing wall, which actually consisted of two facing walls that shook violently, dropped boulders, sprayed lava, and clashed together if they didn't get to the top fast enough. Finally, we returned to the canoeing lake, where the trail led back to the cabins. I've got training to do, Annabeth said flatly. Dinner's at 7:30. Just follow your cabin to the mess hall. Annabeth, I'm sorry about the toilets. Whatever. It wasn't my fault. She looked at me skeptically, and I realized it was my fault. I made water shoot out of the bathroom fixtures. I didn't understand how, but the toilets had responded to me. I'd become one with the plumbing. That's so funny. I really like how Riordan writes, I'd become one with the plumbing. You need to talk to the Oracle. Annabeth said, who? Not who. What? The Oracle. I'll ask Shiran. I stared into the lake, wishing somebody would give me a straight answer for once. I was expecting anybody to be looking back at me, the bathroom. So my heart skipped. Where was it? I just lost my spot again. So my heart skipped a beat when I noticed two teenage girls sitting cross-legged at the base of the pier, about 20 feet below. They wore blue jeans and shimmering green t-shirts, and their brown hair floated loose around their shoulders as minnows darted in and out. They smiled and waved as if I were a long-lost friend. I didn't know what else to do. I waved back. Don't encourage them, Annabeth warned. Naiads are terrible flirts. Naiads? I repeated, feeling completely overwhelmed. That's it. I want to go home now. Annabeth frowned. Don't you get it, Percy? You are home. This is the only safe place on Earth for kids like us. You mean mentally disturbed kids? I mean, not human. Not totally human. Anyways, half human. Half human and half what? I think you know. I didn't want to admit it, but I was afraid I did. I felt a tingling in my limbs, a sensation I sometimes felt when my mom talked about my dad. God? I said. Half God. Annabeth nodded. Your father isn't dead, Percy. He's one of the Olympians. That's crazy. Is it? What's the most common thing gods did in the old stories? They ran around falling in love with humans and having kids with them. Do you think they changed their habits in the last few millennia? But those are just, I almost said myths. Then I remember Charon's warning that in 2,000 years, I might be considered a myth. But if all the kids here are half gods, demigods, Anna said, that's the official term, or half-bloods, then who's your dad? Her hands tightened around the pier railing. I got the feeling I just trespassed on a sensitive subject. My dad is a professor at West Point, he said. I haven't seen him since I was very small. He teaches American history. He's human? What? Human has to be a male god who finds a human female attractive? What sex is that? Who's your mom then? Cabin 6. Meaning... Annabeth straightened. Athena, goddess of wisdom and battle. Okay, I thought, why not? And my dad? Undetermined, Annabeth said. Like I told you before, nobody knows. Except my mother. She knew. Maybe not, Percy. Gods don't always reveal their identities. My dad would have. He loved her. Annabeth gave me a cautious look. She didn't want to burst my bubble. Maybe you're right. Maybe he'll send a sign. That's the only way to know for sure. Your father has to send you a sign claiming you as his son. Sometimes it happens. You mean sometimes it doesn't? Annabeth ran her palm along the rail. The gods are busy. They have a lot of kids and they don't always... Well, sometimes they don't care about us, Percy. They ignore us. What about some of the kids I'd seen in the Hermes cabin? Teenagers who looked sullen and depressed as if they were waiting for a call that never come. I've known kids like that at Yancey Academy. Shuffled off to boarding school by rich parents who didn't have the time to deal with them. But God should behave better. So I'm stuck here, I said. That's it? For the rest of my life? It depends, Annabeth said. Some campers only stay the summer. If you're a child of Aphrodite or Demeter, you're probably not a real powerful force. The monsters might ignore you. So you can get by with a few months of summer training and live in the mortal world the rest of the year. For some of us, it's too dangerous to leave. We're year-rounders. In the mortal world, we attract monsters. They sense us, they come to challenge us. Most of the time, they'll ignore us until we're old enough to cause trouble. About 10 or 11 years old. After that, most demigods either make their way here, or they get killed off. If you manage to survive in the outside world and become famous, believe me, if I told you the names, you'd know them. Some don't even realize they're demigods, but very, very few are like that. So monsters can't get in here? Annabeth shook her head. Not unless they're intentionally stalked in the woods or specifically summoned by somebody on the inside. Why would anybody want to summon a monster? Practice fights? Practical jokes? Practical jokes? The point is, the borders are sealed to keep mortals and monsters out. On the outside, mortals look into the valley and see nothing unusual, just a strawberry farm. So, you're a year-rounder? Annabeth nodded. From under the collar of her t-shirt, she pulled a leather necklace with 5 clay beads of different colors. It was just like Luke's, except Annabeth also had a big gold ring stung on it, like a college ring. I've been here since I was 7, she said. Every August, on the last day of summer season, we get a bead for surviving another year. I've been here longer than most of the counselors, and they're all in college. Why did you come so young? She twisted the ring on the necklace. None of your business. Oh, I stood there for a minute in uncomfortable silence. So, I could just walk out of here right now if I wanted to? It would be suicide, but you could. With Mr. D or Chiron's permission. But they won't give you permission until the end of the summer session unless you were granted a quest. That hardly ever happens. The last time, her voice trailed off. I could tell from her tone that the last time hadn't gone well. Back in the sick room, I said, when you were feeding me that stuff, ambrosia, yeah? You asked me something about the summer solstice. Annabeth's shoulders tensed. So you do know something. Well, no. Back in my old school, I overheard Grover and Chiron talking about it. Grover mentioned the summer solstice. He said something like we didn't have much time because of the deadline. What did that mean? She clenched her fists. I wish I knew. Chiron and the satyrs, they know, but they won't tell me. Something is wrong in Olympus. Something pretty major. Last time I was there, everything seemed so normal. You've been to Olympus? Some of us year-rounders, Luke and Clarice and I, and a few others, we took a field trip during winter solstice. That's when the gods had their big annual council. But how did you get there? The Long Island Railroad, of course. You get off at Penn Station, Empire State Building, special elevator to the 600th floor. She looked at me as if she were sure I must know this already. You are a New Yorker, right? Oh, sure, as far as I knew. There were only 102 floors in the Empire State Building. But I decided not to point that out. Right after we visited, Annabeth continued, the weather got weird, as if the gods had started fighting. A couple of times since, I overheard satyrs talking. The best I can figure out is that something important was stolen. As if it isn't returned by summer solstice, there's going to be trouble. When you came, I was hoping, Athena can get along with just about anybody, except for Ares. Of course, she's got the rivalry with Poseidon. Aside from that, I thought we could work together. I thought you might know something. I shook my head. I wish I could help her, but I felt too hungry and tired and mentally overloaded to ask any more questions. I've got to get a quest, Annabeth muttered to herself. I'm not too young. They would just tell me the problem. I could smell barbecue smoke coming from somewhere nearby Annabeth. Must have heard my stomach growl. She told me to go on. She'd catch me later. I left her on the pier, tracing her finger across the rail, as if drawing a battle plan. Back at Cabin 11, everybody was talking and horsing around, waiting for dinner. For the first time, I noticed a lot of the campers had similar features. Sharp noses, turned eyebrows, mischievous smiles. They were the kind of kids that teachers would peg as troublemakers. Thankfully, nobody paid much attention to me as I walked over to my spot on the floor and plopped down with my Minotaur horn. The counselor, Luke, came over. He had the Hermes family resemblance, too. It was marred by that scar on his right cheek, but his smile was intact. Found you a sleeping bag, he said. Here, I stole you some toiletries from the camp store. I couldn't tell if he was kidding about the stealing part. I said, thanks. No problem. Luke sat next to me, pushed his back against the wall. Tough first day? I don't belong here, I said. I don't even believe in gods. Yeah, he said. That's how we all started. When you start believing them, it doesn't get any easier. Bitterness in his voice surprised me. Because Luke seemed like a pretty easygoing guy. Like he could handle just about anything. So, your dad is Hermes? I asked. He pulled a switchblade out of his back pocket, and for a second I thought he was going to gut me. But he just scraped the mud off the sole of his sandal. Yeah, Hermes. The wing-footed messenger guy. That's him. Messengers, medicine, travelers, merchants, thieves, anybody who uses the roads. That's why you're here. Enjoying Cabin 11's hospitality. Hermes isn't picky about who he sponsors. I figured Luke didn't mean to call me a nobody. He just had a lot in his mind. You ever met your dad? I asked. Once. I waited thinking that if he wanted to tell me, he'd tell me. Apparently he didn't. I wondered if the story had anything to do with how he got his scar. Luke looked up and managed to smile. Don't worry about it, Percy. The campers here, they're mostly good people. After all, we're extended family, right? We take care of each other. He seemed to understand how lost I felt. I was grateful for that, because an older guy like him, even if he was a counselor, should have steered clear of an uncool middle schooler like me. Luke had welcomed me into the cabin. He'd even stolen me some toiletries, which was the nicest thing anybody had ever done for me all day. I started to ask him the big question, and the one that had been bothering me all afternoon. Clarice from Aries was joking about me being Big 3 material. Then Annabeth twice said I may be the one. She said I should talk to the Oracle. What was that all about? Luke folded his knife. I hate prophecies. What do you mean? His face twitched around the scar. Let's just say I messed things up for everybody else. The last 2 years, ever since my trip to the Garden of the Oh boy. My trip to the Garden of the Hesperides went sour. Chiron hasn't allowed any more quests. Annabeth's been dying to get out in the world. She pestered Chiron so much, he finally told her he already knew her fate. He'd have a prophecy from the Oracle. He wouldn't tell her the whole thing, but he said Annabeth was destined to go on a quest. She had to wait until somebody special came to the camp. Somebody special? Don't worry about it, kid, Luke said. Annabeth wants to think every new camper who comes through here is the omen she's been waiting for. Now, come on. It's dinner time. The moment he said that, the horn blew in the distance. Someone knew it was a conch shell, even though I'd never heard one before. Luke yelled, 11, fall in! The whole cabin, about 20 of us, filled into the commons yard, and we lined in the order of seniority. I cannot read. So, of course, I was dead last. Campers came from the other cabins, too, except for the 3 empty cabins at the end, and Cabin 8, which had looked normal in the daytime, but was now starting to glow silver as the sun went down. We marched up the hill to the mess hall pavilion. Satyrs joined us from the meadow. Naiads emerged from the canoeing lake. A few other girls came out of the woods. And when I say out of the woods, I mean straight out of the woods. I saw a Warren girl about 9 or 10 years old melt from the side of a maple tree and come skipping up the hill. In all, there were maybe 100 campers, a few dozen satyrs, and a dozen assorted wood nymphs and naiads. At the pavilion, torches blazed around the marble columns. A central fire burned in a bronze brazier the size of a bathtub. Each cabin had its own table, covered in white cloth, trimmed in purple. 4 of the tables were empty, but cabin 11's was way overcrowded. I had to squeeze onto the edge of the bench with half my butt hanging out. I saw Grover sitting at table 12 with Mr. D, a few satyrs, and a couple of plump blonde boys who looked just like Mr. D. Chiron stood at one side, the picnic table being way too small for a centaur. Annabeth sat at table 6 with a bunch of serious-looking athletic kids, all with her gray eyes and honey blonde hair. Clarice sat behind me at Aries' table. She apparently gotten over being hosed down because she was laughing and belching right alongside her friends. Finally, Chiron pounded his hoof against the marble floor, pavilions, and everybody fell silent. He raised a glass, to the gods! Everyone else raised their glasses, to the gods. Wood nymphs came forward with a platter of food. Grapes, apples, strawberries, cheese, fresh baked, and yes, barbecue. My glass was empty, but Luke said, speak to it, whatever you want, non-alcoholic, of course. I said, cherry Coke. The glass filled with sparkling caramel liquid. Then I had an idea. Blue cherry Coke. Blue cherry Coke. The soda turned a violent shade of cobalt. I took a cautious sip. Perfect. I drank a toast to my mother. She's not gone, I told myself. Not permanently, anyway. She's in the underworld. If that's a real place, then someday... Here you go, Percy, Luke said, handing me a platter of smoked brisket. I loaded my plate and was about to take a big bite when I noticed everybody getting up, carrying their plates toward the fire in the center of the pavilion. I wondered if they were going for dessert or something. Come on. As I got closer, I saw everyone was taking portions of the meal, dropping it into the fire. The ripest strawberry, the juiciest slice of beef, the warmest, most buttery roll. Luke murmured in my eye, burnt offerings for the gods. They like the smell. You're kidding. His look warned me not to take this lightly, but I couldn't help wondering why an immortal, all-powerful being would like the smell of burning food. Luke approached the fire, bowed his head, and tossed in a cluster of fat red grapes. Hermes. I was next. I wish I knew the god's name to say. Finally, may I sound, please? Whoever you are, tell me, please. I scraped a big slice of brisket into the flames. When I got a whiff of the smoke, I didn't gag. It smelled nothing like burning food. It smelled like hot chocolate, fresh baked brownies, hamburgers on the grill, and wild flowers, and 100 other good things that shouldn't have gone well together, but did. I couldn't almost believe the gods could live off that smoke. When everybody had returned to their seats, where did I go? When everybody had returned to their seats and finished eating their meals, Chiron pounded his hoof again for our attention. Mr. D had a huge sign. Yes, I suppose I'd better say hello to all you brats. Well, hello. Our Deputy Director Chiron says the next capture the flag is Friday. Cabin 5 presently holds the laurels. A bunch of ugly cheering rose from the Ares table. Personally, Mr. D continued, I couldn't care less, but congratulations. Also, I should tell you that we have a new camper today. Peter Johnson. Peter Johnson. How basic that name is. Chiron murmured something. Percy Jackson, Mr. D corrected. That's right, hurrah and all that. Now run along to your silly campfire. Go on. Everybody cheered. We all headed down toward the amphitheater where Apollo's cabin let us sing along. Sang a couple songs about the gods and ate s'mores and joked around. The funny thing was, I didn't feel that anyone was staring at me anymore. I felt that I was home. Later in the evening, when the sparks from the campfire were curling into the starry sky, the conch horn blew again. We all filed back to our cabins. I didn't realize how exhausted I was until I collapsed on my borrowed sleeping bag. My fingers curled around the Minotaur's horn. I thought about my mom, but I had good thoughts. Her smile, bedtime stories she would read me when I was a kid, the way she'd tell me to let the bedbugs bite, not to let the bedbugs bite. I closed my eyes and fell asleep instantly. That was my first day at Camp Half-Blood. I wish I'd known how briefly I'd get to enjoy my new home. Okie dokie. Chapter 8 will be continuing in a bit, and we'll call Chapter 8 our final chapter of the night. But until then, we'll be taking our mandatory break. I'm going to go get some more liquid in me. And you guys do something neat too.
君は今泣いた握られた手の中に花びら一枚吹く風がそっと涙を拭う君が見てきた景色にずっとずっと生きているもしも世界が終わるなら花になって寄り添うよあどけない君の笑顔聞こえる笑い声壊された日常が思い出に変えてく
Okay, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. I'll give you guys a little bit to get ready, as we are continuing up with our last chapter of the night, which is Chapter 8. We capture a flag. If memory is correct, I think this is the one where we get the reveal. So anywho, let's get started. The next few days, I settled into a routine that felt almost normal, if you don't count the fact that I was getting lessons from satyrs, nymphs, and a centaur. Each morning, I took ancient Greek from Annabeth, and we talked about the gods and goddesses in the present tense, which was kind of weird. I discovered Annabeth was right about my dyslexia. Ancient Greek wasn't that hard for me to read. At least, no harder than English. After a couple of mornings, I could stumble through a few lines of Homer without too much headache. The rest of the day, I'd rotate through outdoor activities, looking for something I was good at. I forgot. I keep losing. Chiron tried to teach me archery, but we found out pretty quickly I wasn't good with a bow and arrow. He didn't complain, even when he had to desnag a stray arrow out of his tail. Foot racing? No good either. The wood nymph instructors left me in the dust. They told me not to worry about it. They had centuries of practice running away from lovesick gods, but still, it was still humiliating to be slower than a tree. And wrestling, forget it. Every time I got on the mat, Clarice would pulverize me. There's more where that came from, punk, she'd mumble in my ear. The only thing I really excelled at was canoeing, and that was a kind of a heroic skill people expected to see from the kid who had beaten the Minotaur. I knew the senior campers and counselors were watching me, trying to decide who my dad was. But they weren't having an easy time of it. I wasn't as strong as the Ares kids, or as good as archery as the Apollo kids. I didn't have Hephaestus skills with metalwork, or, gods forbid, Dionysius' way with vine plants. Luke told me I might be a child of Hermes, kind of jack of all trades, master of none, but I got the feeling that he was just trying to make me feel better. He really didn't know what to make of me either. Despite all that, I liked camp. I got used to the morning fog over the beach, the smell of hot strawberry fields in the afternoon, even the weird noises of monsters in the woods at night. I would eat dinner with Cabin 11, scrape part of my meal into the fire, and try to feel some connection to my real dad. Nothing came, just the warm feeling I'd always had, like the memory of his smile. I tried not to think too much about my mom, but I kept wondering if gods and monsters were real, if all the magic stuff was possible. Surely there was some way to save her, to bring her back. I started to understand Luke's bitterness and how he seemed to resist his father Hermes. So, okay, maybe gods had important things to do, but couldn't they call once in a while, or thunder or something? Denosius could make Diet Coke appear out of thin air. Why couldn't my dad, whoever he was, make a phone appear? Thursday afternoon, 3 days after I arrived at Camp Half-Blood, I had my first sword fighting lesson. Everybody from Cabin 11 gathered in the big curricular arena, where Luke would be our instructor. I started with basic stabbing and slashing, using some straw-stuffed dummies and Greek armor. I guess I did okay. At least I understood what I was supposed to do, and my reflexes were good. The problem was, I couldn't find a blade that felt right in my hands. Either they were too heavy, or too light, or too long. Luke's tried his best to fix me up, but he agreed that none of the practice blades seemed to work for me. We moved on to dueling in pairs. Luke announced he would be my partner since it was my first time. Good luck, one of the campers told me. Luke's the best swordsman in the last 300 years. Maybe he'll go uneasy with me? I said. The camper snorted. Luke showed me thrusts and parries and shield blocks the hard way. With every swipe, I got a little more battered and bruised. Keep your guard up, Percy, he said. Then whapped me in the ribs with the flat of his blade. No, not that far up. Whap, lunge, whap, now back, whap. By the time we called a break, I was soaked in sweat. Everybody swarmed the drinks cooler. Luke poured ice water on his head, which looked like such a good idea. I did the same. Instantly, I felt better. Strength surged back into my arms. Sword didn't feel so awkward. Okay, everybody, circle up, Luke ordered. If Percy doesn't mind, I want to give you a little demo. Great, I thought. Let's all watch Percy get pounded. The Hermes guys gathered around. They were suppressing smiles. I figured they'd been in my shoes before and couldn't wait to see how Luke used me for a punching bag. He told everybody he was going to demonstrate a disarming technique. How to twist the enemy's blade with the flat of his own sword, so that he had no choice but to drop his weapon. This is difficult, he stressed. I've had it used against me. No laughing at Percy now. Most swordsmen have to work years to master this technique. He demonstrated the move on me in a slow motion. Sure enough, the sword clattered on my hands. Now in real time, he said. After I retrieved my weapon, we keep sparring until one of us pulls it off. Ready, Percy? I nodded, and Luke came after me. Somehow, I kept him from getting a shot at the hilt of my sword. My senses opened up. I saw his attacks coming. I countered. I stepped forward. I tried to thrust on my own. Luke deflected it easily, but I saw a chance in his face. His eyes narrowed, and he started to press me with more force. The sword grew heavy in my hand. The balance wasn't right. I knew it was only a matter of seconds before Luke took me down, so I figured, what the heck? I tried the disarming maneuver. My blade hit the base of Luke's, and I twisted, putting my whole weight into a downward thrust. Clang! Luke's sword rattled against the stones. The tip of my blade was an inch from his underfelt chest. The other campers were silent. I lowered my sword. Sorry. For a moment, Luke was too stunned to speak. Sorry? His scarred face broke into a grin. By the gods, Percy, why are you sorry? Show me that again! I didn't want to. A short burst of manic energy had completely abandoned me, but Luke insisted. This time, there was no contest. The moment our swords connected, Luke hit my hilt and sent my weapon skidding across the floor. After a long pause, somebody beyond said, "Beginner's luck." Luke wiped the sweat off his brow. He praised He appraised at me with an entirely new interest. Maybe he said, "But I wonder what Percy could do with a balanced sword." Friday afternoon, I was sitting with Grover at the lake, resting with a near-death experience on the climbing wall. Grover had scampered to the top of like a mountain goat, but the lava had almost gotten me. My shirt was smoking holes in it. The hairs had been singed off my forearms. We sat on the pier, watching the naiads do underwater basket weaving, till I got the nerve to ask Grover how his conversation had gone with Mr. D. His face turned a sickly shade of yellow. "Fine," he said. "Just great." "So your career's still on track?" He glanced at me nervously. "Chiron told you I want a searcher's license?" "Well, no. I had no idea what a searcher's license was, but it didn't seem like the right time to ask. He just said you had big plans, and that you needed credit for completing a keeper's assignment. So did you get it?" Grover looked down at the naiads. Mr. D suspended judgment. He said I hadn't failed or succeeded with you yet, so our fates are still tied together. You got a quest, and if you got a quest and I went along to protect you, and we both came back alive, then maybe he'd consider the job complete. My spirits lifted. Well, that's not so bad, right? He might as well have transferred me to stable cleaning duty. The chances of you getting a quest, even if you did, why would you want me along? Of course I'd want you along. Grover stared gloomy in the water. Basket weaving. Must be nice to have a useful skill. I tried to reassure him that he had a lot of talents, but that just made him look more miserable. We talked about the canoeing and swordplay for a while, then debated the pros and cons of the different gods. Finally, I asked him about the 4 empty cabins. "Number 8, the silver one, belongs to Artemis," he said. "She vowed to be a maiden forever, so of course, no kids. The cabin is, honorary. If she didn't have one, she'd be mad." "Yeah, okay, but the other 3? The ones at the end? Are those the big 3? Grover tensed. We were getting close to a touchy subject. "No, one of them, number 2, is Hera's," he said. "That's another honorary thing. She's the goddess of marriage, so of course she wouldn't go around having affairs like mortals. That's her husband's job. When we say the big 3, we mean the 3 powerful brothers, the sons of Kronos. Zeus, Poseidon, Hades? Right, after the great battle of the Titans, they took over the world from their dad and drew lots to decide who got what. Zeus got the sky, Poseidon got the sea, Hades got the underworld. But Hades doesn't have a cabin here. No, he doesn't have a throne on Olympus either. He sort of does his own thing down in the underworld. If he did have a cabin here, we're sure, well, it wouldn't be pleasant. Let's leave it at that. Zeus and Poseidon, they both had like a bazillion kids in the myths. Why are their cabins empty?" Grover shifted his hooves uncomfortably. "About 60 years ago, after World War II, the Big Three agreed they wouldn't sire any more heroes. Their children were just too powerful. They were affecting the course of human events too much, causing too much carnage. World War II, that was basically a fight between the sons of Zeus and Poseidon on one side, and the sons of Hades on the other. The winning side, Zeus and Poseidon, made Hades swear an oath with them. No more affairs with mortal women. They all swore on the river Styx. Thunder boomed. I said, "That's the most serious oath you can make." Grover nodded, and the brothers kept their word. Sorry. I just have an inch. No kids. Grover's face darkened. 17 years ago, Zeus fell off the wagon. There was this TV starlet with a big, fluffy 80s hairdo, but he just couldn't help himself. When their child was born, a girl named Talia, well, the River Styx is serious about promises. Zeus himself got off easy because he's immortal, but he brought a terrible fate on his daughter. That isn't fair. It wasn't the little girl's fault. Grover hesitated. Percy, children of the Big Three have powers greater than any other half-bloods. They have a strong aura, a scent that attracts monsters. When Hades found out about the girl, he wasn't too happy about Zeus breaking his oath. Hades let the worst monsters out of Tartarus to torment Thalia. A satyr was assigned to be her keeper when she was 12. But there was nothing he could do. He tried to escort her with a couple of other half-bloods she befriended. They almost made it. They got all the way to the top of the hill. He pointed across the valley at the pine tree where I fought the Minotaur. All three kindly ones were after them, along with a horde of hellhounds. They were about to be overrun when Talia told her satyr to take the other two half-bloods to safety while she held off the monsters. She was wounded and tired. She didn't want to live like a hunted animal. Satyr didn't want her to leave, but she couldn't change her mind. She had to protect the others. So Talia made her final stand alone at the top of that hill. As she died, Zeus took pity on her. He turned her into that pine tree. Her spirit still helps protect the borders of the valley. That's why this hill is called Half-Blood Hill. I stared at the pine in the distance. The story made me feel hollow and guilty too. A girl my age had sacrificed herself to save her friends. She'd have faced a whole army of monsters. Next to that, my victory over the Minotaur didn't seem like much. I wondered, if I acted differently, could I have saved my mother? Grover, I said, have heroes really gone on quests to the underworld? Sometimes, he said. Orpheus, Hercules, Houdini. And have they ever returned somebody from the dead? No, never. Orpheus came close. Percy, you're not seriously thinking... No, I lied. I was just wondering, so... Satyr is always assigned to guard a demigod. Grover studied me warily. I hadn't persuaded him that I'd really dropped the underworld idea. Not always. We go undercover to a lot of schools. We try to sniff out the Half-Bloods who have the makings of great heroes. If we find ones who are with a very strong aura, like a child of the Big Three, we alert Chiron. He tries to keep an eye on them since they could cause really huge problems. And you found me. Chiron said you thought I might be something special. Grover looked as if I had led him into a trap. I didn't... Oh, listen, don't think like that. If you were, you'd never be allowed on a quest. I'd never get my license. You're probably a child of Hermes, or maybe even one of the minor gods, like Nemesis, the god of revenge. Don't worry, okay? I got the idea he was reassuring himself more than me. That night after dinner, there was a lot more excitement than usual. At last, it was time for Capture the Flag. When the plates were cleared away, the conch horn sounded as we all stood at our tables. Campers yelled and cheered as Annabeth and two of her siblings ran into the pavilion carrying a silk banner. It was about 10 feet long, glistening gray, with a painting of barn owl above an olive tree. From the opposite side of the pavilion, Clarice and her buddies ran in with another banner of identical size big but gaudy red, painted with a bloody sphere and a boar's head. I turn to Luke and yell over the noise, "Those are the flags?" Yeah, Ares and Athena always lead the teams. Not always, but often. So if another cabin captures one, what do? We paint the flag? He grinned. You'll see. First, we have to get one. Whose side are we on? He gave me a sly look, as if he knew something I didn't. The scar on his face made him look almost evil in the torchlight. Foreshadowing. We've made a temporary alliance with Athena tonight. Tonight, we get the flag from Ares, and you are going to help. The teams were announced. Athena had made an alliance with Apollo and Hermes, the two biggest cabins. Apparently, privileges have been traded. Shower times, chore schedules, the best slots for activities in order to win support. Ares had allied themselves with everybody else. Dionysius, Demeter, Aphrodite, and Hephaestus. From what I've seen, Dionysius' kids were actually good athletes, but there were only two of them. Demeter's kids had the edge with nature skills and outdoor stuff, but they weren't very aggressive. Aphrodite's sons and daughters, I wasn't too worried about. They mostly sat out every activity and checked their reflections in the lake, and did their hair and gossiped. Hephaestus' kids weren't pretty, and there were only four of them. They were big and burly from working in the metal shop all day. That might be a problem. That, of course, left Ares' cabin. A dozen of the biggest, ugliest, meanest kids on Long Island, or anywhere else on the planet. Chiron hammered his hoof in the marble. "Heroes," he announced. "You know the rules. The creek is the boundary line. The entire forest is fair game. All magic items are allowed. The banner must be prominently displayed and have no more than 2 guards. Prisoners may be disarmed, but may not be bound or gagged. No killing or maiming is allowed. I will serve as referee and battlefield medic. Arm yourselves." He spread his hands, and the tables were suddenly covered with equipment. Helmets, bronze swords, spears, oxhide shields, coated in metal. "Whoa," I said. "We're really supposed to use these?" Luke looked at me as if I were crazy. "Unless you want to get skewered by your friends in cabin 5. Here, Chiron think these would fit. You'll be on border patrol." My shield was the size of an NBA black backboard, with a big caduceus in the middle. It weighed about 1,000,000 pounds. I could have snowboarded on it fine, but I had hoped nobody seriously expected me to run fast. My helmet, like all the helmets in Athena's side, were blue horsehair plume. On top, Ares and their armies had red plumes, and if they yelled, "Blue team forward!" We cheered and shook our swords and followed her down the path to the south woods. The red team yelled taunts at us as they headed off toward the north. I managed to catch up with Annabeth without tripping over my equipment. "Hey," she kept marching. "So what's the plan? Got any magic items you can loan me?" Her hand drifted toward her pocket as she were afraid I'd stolen something. "Just watch Clarissa's sphere," she said. "You don't want that thing touching you. Otherwise, don't worry. We'll take the banner from Ares." Has Luke given you your jobs? Border patrol, whatever that means. It's easy. Stand by the creek, keep the Reds away, leave the rest to me. Athena always has a plan. She pushed ahead, leaving me in the dust. "Okay," I mumbled. "Glad you wanted me on your team." It was a warm, sticky night. The woods were dark, with fireflies popping in and out of view. Annabeth stationed me next to a little creek that gurgled over some rocks. Then she and the rest of the team scattered into the trees. Standing there alone with my big blue feathered helmet and my huge shield, I felt like an idiot. The bronze sword, like all the swords I tried so far, seemed balanced wrong. The leather grip pulled on my hand like a bowling ball. There was no way anybody would actually attack me. Would they? I mean, Olympus had to have liability issues, right? Right? Far away, the conch horn blew. I heard whoops and yells in the woods, a clanking of metal, kids fighting. A blue plummeled ally from Apollo raced past me like a deer, leaped through the creek, and disappeared into enemy territory. Great, I thought. I'll miss all the fun, as usual. Then I heard a sound that sent a chill up my spine. A low canine growl somewhere close by. I raised my shield instinctively. I had the feeling something was stalking me. Then the growling stopped. I felt the presence retreating. On the other side of the creek, the underbrush exploded. 5 Ares warriors came yelling and screaming out of the dark. "Cream that punk!" Clarice screamed. Her ugly pig eyes glared through the slits of her helmet. She brandished a 5-foot-long spear. Its barbed metal tip flickering with red light. Her siblings had only the standard bronze swords. Not that made me feel any better. Yes, there's actually 2 that's. They charged across the stream. There was no help in sight. I could run, or I could defend myself against half the Ares cabin. I managed to sidestep the first kid's swing, but these guys were not as stupid as the Minotaur. They surrounded me, and Clarice thrust at me with her spear. My shield deflected the point, but I felt a painful tingling all over my body. My hair stood on end, my shield arm went numb, and the air burned. Electricity. Her stupid shield was electric? I fell back. Another Ares guy slammed me in the chest with the butt of his sword, and I hit the dirt. They could have kicked me into jelly, but they were too busy laughing. "Give him a haircut," Clarice said. "Grab his hair." I managed to get to my feet. I raised my sword. Clarice slammed it aside with her spear as sparks flew. Now both my arms felt numb. "Oh wow," Clarice said. "I'm scared of this guy. Really scared." "The flag is that way," I told her. I wanted to sound angry, but I was afraid it didn't come out that way. "Yeah?" one of her siblings. "But see, we don't care about the flag. We care about a guy who made our cabin look stupid." You do that without my help," I told them. It probably wasn't the smartest thing to say. 2 of them came to me. I backed up toward the creek, tried to raise my shield, but Clarice was too fast. Her spear stuck me straight in the ribs. If I hadn't been wearing an armored breastplate, it would have been shish kebab. I would have been shish kebabbed. As it was, the electric point just about shook my teeth out of my mouth. One of her cabinmates slashed his sword across my arm, leaving a giant-sized cut. Seeing my own blood made me dizzy, warm and cold at the same time. "No maiming," I managed to say. "Oops," the guy said. "Guess I lost my dessert privilege." He pushed me into the creek and I landed with a splash. They all laughed. I figured as soon as they were through being amused, I would die. Then something happened. The water seemed to wake up my senses, as if I had just had a bag of my mom's double espresso jelly beans. Clarice and her cabinmates came into the creek to get me, but I stood to meet them. I knew what to do. I swung flat, my sword against the first guy's head, and knocked the helmet clean off. I hit him so hard I could see his eyeballs vibrating as he crumbled into the water. Ugly number 2 and ugly number 3 came at me. I slammed one in the face with my shield and used my sword to shear off the other guy's horsehair plume. Both of them backed up quick. Ugly number 4 didn't look real anxious to attack, but Clarice kept coming, the point of her spear cackling with energy. As soon as she thrust, I caught the shaft between the edge of my shield and my sword, and I snapped it like a twig. Ugh, she screamed, "You idiot, you corpse breath worm." She probably would have said worse, but I smacked her between the eyes with my sword butt and sent her stumbling backward out of the creek. Then I heard yelling, elated screams, and I saw Luke racing toward the boundary line with the red team's banners lifted high. He was flanked by a couple of Hermes guys covering his retreat, and a few Apollos behind them, fighting off the Hephaestus kids. The Ares folks got up, and Clarice muttered a dazed curse. "A trick," she shouted. "It was a trick." They staggered after Luke, but it was too late. Everybody converged on the creek as Luke ran across into friendly territory. Our side exploded into cheers. The red banner shimmered and turned to silver. The boar and spear were replaced with a huge caduceus, the symbol of the Cabin 11. Everybody on the blue team picked up Luke and started carrying him around on his shoulders. Chiron cantered out with the words in blue of the conch horn. "The game is over. We won." I was about to join the celebration when Annabeth's voice right next to me in the creek said, "Not bad, hero." I looked, but she wasn't there. "Where the heck did you learn to fight like that?" she asked. The air shimmered, and she materialized, holding a Yankees baseball cap as if she had taken it off her head. I felt myself getting angry. I wasn't even fazed by the fact that she had just been invisible. "You set me up," I said. "You put me here because you knew Clarice would come after me, while you sent Luke around the flank. You had it all figured out." I said, "I told you." And Athena always has a plan. Plan to get me pulverized. I came as fast as I could. I was about to jump in, but she shrugged. "You didn't need help." Then she noticed my wounded arm. "How did you do that?" "Sword cut. What do you think?" "No, it was a sword cut. Look at it." The blood was gone. There was a huge cut. Where the huge cut had been, there was a long white scratch. And even that was fading. As I watched, it turned into a small scar and disappeared. I don't get it," I said. Annabeth was thinking hard. I could almost see the gears turning. She looked down at my feet, then at Clarice's broken spear and said, "Step out of the water, Percy. What? Just do it." I came out of the creek and immediately felt bone tired. My arms started to get numb. My adrenaline rush left me. I almost fell over, but Annabeth steadied me. "Oh, sticks," she cursed. "This is not good." I assumed it would be Zeus. Before I could ask what she meant, I heard that canine growl again, but much closer than before. A howl ripped through the forest. The campers cheering died instantly. Chiron shouted in ancient Greek, which I would have realized only later I had understood perfectly. "Stand ready, my bow!" Annabeth drew her sword. There on the rocks just above us There on the rocks just above us was a black hound the size of a rhino with lava red eyes and fangs like daggers. It was looking straight at me. Nobody moved except Annabeth, who yelled, "Percy, run!" She tried to step in front of me, but the hound was too fast. I leaped over her, an enormous shadow with teeth, and it just hit me. as I stumbled backward and felt its razor-sharp claws ripping through my armor. There was a cascade of thwacking sounds, like 40 pieces of paper being ripped one after the other. And the hound's neck sprouted a cluster of arrows. The monster fell dead at my feet. By some miracle, I was still alive. I didn't want to look underneath the ruins of my shredded armor. My chest felt warm and wet, and I knew I was badly cut. Another second and the monster would have turned me into 100 pounds of delicatessen meat. I might have mispronounced that. Chiron trotted up next to us, a bow in his hand, his face grim. De immortales, I said. That's a hellhound from the fields of punishment. They're not supposed to. Someone summoned it, Chiron said. Someone inside the camp. Luke came over, the banner in hand forgotten, his moment of glory gone. Clarice yelled, "It's all Percy's fault. Percy summoned it." "Be quiet, child," Chiron told her. We watched the body of the hellhound melted into shadow, soaking to the ground until it disappeared. "You're wounded," Annabeth told me. "Quick, Percy, get in the water." "I'm okay." "No, you're not," Chiron said. "Chiron, watch this." I was too tired to argue. I stepped back into the creek, the whole camp gathering around me. Instantly, I felt better. I could feel the cuts on my chest closing up. Some of the campers gasped. "Look, I don't know why," I said, trying to apologize. "I'm sorry." They weren't watching the Wywoon seal. They were staring at something above my head. "Percy?" Annabeth said, pointing. By the time I looked up, the sign was already fading, but I could still make out the hologram of green light, spinning and gleaming. A 3-tipped spear, a trident. "Your father," Annabeth murmured. "This is really not good." "It is determined." All around me, campers started kneeling, even the Ares cabin, though they didn't look happy about it. "My father?" I asked, completely bewildered. "Poseidon, Earthshaker, Stormbringer, father of horses, hail. Hail Percy Jackson, son of the sea god." And with that, we will conclude this fun little stream. Thank you guys for listening in to another exciting Percy Jackson reading. And we now know that Percy Jackson is the son of Poseidon. But then again, if you knew about the series, you probably knew that. So, we'll be reading someone. And I hope you guys have a wonderful night. And we'll be doing something different for tomorrow. I just have to figure out what that is. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.